Hello everybody, this is Alex Big Blue and welcome to my top 10 Batman villains. So I'll be telling you guys my top 10 favorite Batman villains. Let's get right to it. Number 10. Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze has been one of my favorite Bat villains since I was a kid. He was my favorite then on the animated series. And he's overall just been a very interesting character because his tragic origin story where he's trying to save his wife Nora, but he has to freeze her because there's no cure yet, is one of the more interesting backstories in villain history, I would say, especially one of the better tragic ones. And his freeze ray is one of the coolest weapons overall, and I really like any kind of ice villain or character in general. I always kind of dig anyways. So yeah, Mr. Freeze overall is just a really cool character, and a pretty interesting one at that. Number 9. Man-Bat. Man-Bat has always been a really cool character. I really like the way his character looks and acts. He's more of just kind of like an actual creature as opposed to a character necessarily, like a person, like a lot of the other ones. And I think he's always been unique as a villain to Batman for that reason. He's very unpredictable and very physically strong, and of course, where he can fly. And I think he's just a really cool inverse character to take on Batman, where he's actually even more like a bat than Batman, technically. But yeah, really cool. I've always liked that character a lot. Very interesting. I think he definitely makes for one of the more interesting Batman villains. Number 8. Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn is one of the more interesting female characters in comics because she is a villain who started out as a normal person but got persuaded and kind of went crazy because of the Joker, who she was the therapist to. So very interesting backstory to start off with. But she becomes one of the more wacky and kind of random characters that is more or less just kind of like random chaos at any moment. You never know what she's going to do. And that makes her really interesting. Kind of a wild card by nature. And her the fact that she started out on the animated series as a character is really cool as well. Because usually you're a comic character first, before that. So that's very interesting as well. I've always really liked that. But her first red and black Jester-looking costume was really awesome, as well as all of her looks after that. She's a very versatile character that you can use in different ways. Even she branches out as anti-hero sometimes now. But I always liked her as a villain and teamed up with the Joker especially. Or teaming up with Poison Ivy or whoever else it may be. But yeah, overall I think Harley Quinn's a really cool character and a very interesting personality. And she's definitely one of the better rogues in Batman's gallery. Number 7. Bane. Bane is one of the more threatening characters in all of Batman's rogues gallery. He is super physically imposing, super strong, very intelligent, and he has a fascinating backstory of how he became like that. And of course he gets injected with the toxic known as venom. And yeah, just very, very imposing overall. He, of course, broke the bat, as he broke Batman's back before, a feat that not many can claim. And he's just overall a really cool-looking character and an interesting one that is very physical and has a pretty deep story as well. So he's a very, very interesting character. Number 6. Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy is one of the more interesting villains in general, I always think, because her powers is very unique. Her ability to communicate with plant life as well as control it is very cool. And her costume is awesome. And I just think her looks and her powers make her a really iconic Batman villain. Number 5. Clayface. Clayface has always been one of my favorite DC villains in general, as a young kid especially. Because on the Batman the Animated Series, I remember him being one of the more interesting and cool villains on there. And since I've saw him in comics and everything else, of course, I just really dig the character a lot. His powers are really cool, and he makes for a very ominous and threatening villain, kind of like a monster. And yeah, just very cool overall. I really like it a lot, where he can shapeshift or hide or anything like that. Kind of almost like a DC version of Sandman from Marvel. But yeah, very cool, a very interesting look. I've always really liked the character a lot, and he's definitely one of the cooler ones. Number 4. Killer Croc. Killer Croc is one of the great animalistic villains that Batman faces. He's very ferocious and very strong physically, as well as very dangerous entirely. And I think he's always been a really cool character that I've always liked a lot. As a kid, I really liked the character, and I still do now. I think his role in the Arkham games was always very interesting, too, if you ever played those. And I think his look, where he actually looks like a giant crocodile man, has always been very interesting and very unique. And I definitely think he's just one of the better overall creature type of villains that Batman has, and I've always really liked that character. Number 3. The Riddler. The Riddler has always been one of the more interesting characters in Batman's rogues gallery because he tries to outwit Batman instead of just beat him up in a normal one-on-one battle. So the fact that he tries to he does riddles all the time, and the fact that he tries to do it and you have to solve the crimes that he's doing by solving the riddles has always been very cool. And I think he really makes for one of the more interesting villains for that reason. And his overall look, where his costumes, is very flashy and very interesting as well. And he's a very good character study into his psychology of why he's like that is always pretty interesting. But yeah, I think he's one of the more interesting and one of the more devious opponents of the Batman. Number 2. The Joker. So the Joker, of course, is the most iconic Batman villain and one of the most iconic villains in general. He's certainly one of the better ones as well. He's always been one of my favorite ones. The clown prince of crimes, overall insanity, random violence, and unpredictability makes him one of the coolest characters and most interesting, certainly. And he's a very vile villain at that, doing some awful things at times. I really liked his movie portrayals as well, where he was played by Heath Ledger, of course, in The Dark Knight. It was a great movie and a great portrayal of the Joker there. And I especially like the Joker movie as well, where he was played by Joaquin Phoenix. I just think both of those really captured the Joker and the way he acts, especially in the newer comics. But overall, as his unpredictable chaos and the madness that he ensues. And yeah, I really like the character overall in movies and especially comics as well. And he's just certainly one of the best ones, and I've always really enjoyed the character. Number 1. Scarecrow. Straight out of a scary movie is a Scarecrow. He is one of the coolest characters in all of comics, in my opinion, especially being on the villain side. I really like his look. It's really creepy, no matter which variation it is. And I like the way that he attacks people, using their fears on them, using the poison, of course, the toxic gas, doing it that way, where it's using their own psyche against them has always been very interesting. He's just a really cool character, very awesome, very devious and very deceptive in his way he battles people. I think he makes a really good matchup for Batman for all of those reasons. And I've really always liked him a lot in the Arkham games. He's always been my favorite part of those, quite frankly. But yeah, I really like Scarecrow a lot. I've always just really dug him on the animated series and in the comics. And he's just really cool, and he's my favorite one for those reasons. Thank you all so much for watching. And make sure you subscribe if you aren't already. I'd really appreciate it. And be sure to check out my Top 10 videos. I will leave the playlist at the end of this video.